we're gonna have a good time here because I know because we've had a previous conversation and we talked about how we're gonna beat that for the other conversation. So, but it's not a matter of beating; it's a matter of adding and more value and all that. So, welcome Dee to the Leaders Who Care series. I'm so glad you're here.
And well, it's my absolute pleasure. And you're right, we had a great time, and I expect we're going to do the same today.
It's already just begun. So let's start, if you would, by telling everybody who you are. We'll get into the business stuff or whatever in a bit, but who you are, where you're originally from, where you are now, family, your favorite color if you want to, I don't know, maybe something you've never told anybody ever and you wanted to reveal it.
We're all best friends now. So, well, look, it's a joy to be here. So thanks for having me. And I own and operate Robinson Hill, and we have several companies under that, but ultimately we own and operate restaurants and retail and airports across the country. And I'm going to thank the audience already because I know many have already been customers because I'm a partner with Hudson News. And then also author. I had a new book that released last year called Courage by Design. And I'm also a craft distiller. So I have our first bourbon coming into the market. And favorite color, I think yellow. It just probably about everything I like to do in life is how do we go about shining our light? And yellow is just a beautiful color of light. Yes. So absolutely. So if people wonder why Dee Robinson likes yellow, I think it's because I just think that it's a color that represents the world and what we could be.
That's super cool. Now, what about where'd you grow up, your family?
So I love this. So this, I always talk about the winding road because, it's rare that we all just walk a straight one. But born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. So I am a Buck. I love Ohio State. I'm a Browns, and I am an Indians fan. I know right now they're going through name change. But I actually grew up there until I went to high school, had the great fortune to go to boarding school in Massachusetts. And then from there, I went to the University of Pennsylvania and then worked for a while, and we can chat about more details because I'm a former banker. And I say now, I just call myself just sort of this troublemaker. But Cleveland is what I considered home. However, my adult life has been spent in Chicago, so I consider that my home as well. And then I recently moved to Charleston, so I spent time between here and there. So all great cities. I would say about what I am also as a foodie. I love food. We can chat about that. But those are, and I guess that's probably the thing a lot of people don't know about me. I love dining experiences. I love to cook. I even actually published a cookbook just because I wanted to put recipes down so my daughter and my brother's daughters will actually one day maybe embrace all the cooking my mom did. Because growing up, I tell everyone and everything I write about is my mother. But she was just, I got lucky in that department, and everything I am, I owe to her truly. But she also expressed love through food. And so I think I do the same. And so I think that's something that people may not know about me, because even though I'm in the restaurant space and all of that, it really emanated from a love for my mom and her sense of warmth and hospitality for anyone. And I mean anyone that knocked at her door.
Yeah, well, I guess I know one of the people you're going to talk about as an influencer when we get to that later on and stuff. I saw Arnold Schwarzenegger in an interview recently, and he said he loves washing dishes. And the person that was interviewing him said, "What do you mean you love washing dishes?" He said, "Well, that's my only skill in the kitchen, so that's the way I contribute to all the good stuff that's happening in the kitchen." Because it's a great atmosphere, isn't it?
You know what, it really is. And actually, when I left my corporate job, I actually thought that I would become a chef. And I would implore anyone that's sort of thinking about new transitions or changing professions to first give it a try. I also had no fear working for free because I knew where I was going. I was learning. But true story, thought I wanted to be a chef. I had the great pleasure to actually cook in Charlie Trotter's kitchen. Wow. And I left there that night absolutely knowing that I did not want to be a chef. I said, I know I like to cook, but there was such passion and And I said, that wasn't where I was at that time. And I remember leaving there thinking I want to own restaurants, which ultimately I did. But the kitchen was not, as a chef. I love entertaining and cooking. So just something to think about as we think about where we want to go in life. You know, I always say, test the waters if you really want to know if you love it. And I do love food. I love cooking, but not as a chef.
Yeah, a lot of people ask me that they would love to work for a sports team. And I said, you know what it's like to work for a sports team? You're not watching all the games and stuff, you know, you're doing all this other stuff. So you really got to know. But going back a bit then, what were you like as a kid and a teenager? Were you the first to try stuff? Were you always interested in food? What were you like?
Well, again, back to the influencer of Helen Hill, and is that I was probably considered a goody two shoes in that, you know, I have a twin brother, and what we were as kids were, you know, academics mattered. You know, we had a requirement to have chores done at the end of the day, you know, everything, homework. And if my mom got home and those things were not done, there was hell to pay. But the beautiful part of that is it taught me this discipline, right, of how to work. But as a kid, I was a curious one. But remember, there's a twin, so there's my brother and there's me. And so if he went one way, I probably went the other. And it's kind of interesting. He's a brilliant mind, PhD now of pharmacy. He could look at chemistry, and I thought I wanted to do it. And I was like, I don't think that way. But I was just a kid who was also, this is probably the most important part about growing up. I wasn't a follower. I tried new things, and you think about smoking, you know, everybody, I don't know if anybody really loved smoking for the first time. I tried it and didn't like it and stopped. And it's just like, because people were doing it. But early on, I learned that I didn't need to follow the crowd to feel accepted or just finding my own path. Right. And sometimes learning that that was a better path than the one that the crowd might have taken.
There's some power and just a good feeling about yourself that you're okay being different, right?
Well, you know what? That's what confidence is, and you know, and courage that comes into play. But you know, I think when we learn to finally just embrace who we are, do what we know we must do, and not worry about what anyone else thinks. And it was one of the lessons my mom taught me, and I'm glad I learned that later in life, is that never care about what other people think. And unfortunately, too many people do. And then it stops them from actually pursuing their dream. They're just afraid to step out there. But there's someone out there on the other side. And sometimes I just think pursuing the path less traveled is a good thing.
Yeah, and the path of least resistance doesn't hurt either. Also,
absolutely.
So tell us about the path you took education wise. What made you go? You went economics at U of Penn, then your MBA in marketing at Northwest Kellogg, basically. What intrigued you to go down that path?
Well, a couple of things, and thanks for asking that. First and foremost, growing up, education was valued, and I talked about the requirement for homework, right? And so my mom instantly understood how important it was for us as we wanted to pursue life. I learned something later too, that when you know your parents are pushing you for education and doing other things, you know, we got to remember one thing, that maybe they, and all parents I think are like this, they all want something more for their children. So I think at the same time, certain opportunities were not made available to my mom. And at the same time, understanding that, you know, a great education was important, because what education couldn't do is necessarily, and it can in many cases, but it minimizes the doors that might close. You know, so if I had a degree from the University of Pennsylvania, I mean, at least at one point they might actually think that, you know, I have some kind of intelligence and ability. And so I almost went to Dartmouth, and but ended up choosing Penn because I came from a small community, and then decided, Mom, I had been in this small little town for high school. I wanted something bigger. Penn was an amazing experience. I loved it. But it got back to this idea of pursuing your own path. You know, it's easy to sort of operate in your own little micro community, but I was curious enough. And that's why I know that I love Penn. And then even for Kellogg, when I left undergrad, I went to work for a bank. Northern Trust was my first bank. I love that I still have some connections there. But ultimately, I then went to business school knowing that I wanted more. But also, again, getting a great education. And then at least I knew those were doors that would open to me. And also, I will tell everyone too about my education. You know, I'm an entrepreneur now. My company's 25 years plus, right?
Amazing.
How much did business school and undergrad prepare you? I would say this, undergrad has been best about experiences and people. Grad school that gives you tools, but ultimately, you know, it's life experiences that really prepared me to build my company.
Yeah, it's interesting. We focus, we'll talk about this in a bit, we focus on the talent side of, you know, we have impact and talent in our company. And on the talent side, it's all about experiences, not years of experience and accomplishments and,
right,
and all that. And the more experiences you get, the better. And it could be even maturing during your bachelor's as your experiences to the tools, as you said. And, you know, with respect to the experiences you had engaging with leaders in corporate America, when we launched Fifth Element, we actually launched it on the premise that leaders in their businesses can do way better in business when they're also doing good. And I know you've seen that in the different engagements you've had with different leaders in corporate. You know, you were with Leo Burnett, you were with, you know, J&J, you were in the banking industry, and also different board roles you had in different industries too, health, beauty, gaming, etc. All that had to frame your passion, give you the courage to, as I think you say, to lean in and act and do the right thing. So can you share some of those experiences and how you were able to achieve, but also see the economic and the social impact for doing the right thing too?
So oftentimes I talk about ROP3, return on people, profit, and purpose. And early in my career as well, I learned this one very simple fact. It's a universal law that as we give, the universe gives back to us. Even as I chose partners, understanding the importance of aligning with people whose values were aligned, and together I knew that we could do good. Because if they're not, there's conflict and it keeps you from achievement, particularly in the things when it's about our people. And so first I'll talk about people, just simply knowing as we do good, we demonstrate what we want them to be in the world, and then hopefully call the good within them to go out and do the work, whether it's the stuff that's within the organization or the things they do without. But knowing that, my mom always said, you know, we can leave people in places better than you found them. And so that the premise of that is just doing good. And then also the joy of doing good is simply this, is that I can impact a life. And then whether I just do one, and I just believe this, that if you impact one, you'll impact another. As I look at companies as well, I think fear plays too big of a role sometimes because we aren't comfortable with the unknown.
Right.
And it's mind-boggling to me how organizations are still struggling with diversity, equity, inclusion, and I also now say J, justice. And part of it is that you don't see, you know, the metrics, you know, what you don't measure, right? You know, you can't manage. Mm. And I think that part of them recognize, yeah, we know we've done not a great job, but I'm saying it's okay wherever you are on the spectrum. Let's take a hard look and actually recognize that innovation, leadership, even your sales. And then when people feel that they can trust an organization, they are going to bring their best selves to the company. So finding ways to invest, measure, even thinking about how we might tie compensation to how we do development. And then also that people come into organizations at different levels and recognize that we must think about how, you know, one group might need certain things, but we invest so much in recruitment, and yet we don't put the dollars into development. And again, that's all about good, because if I deposit into the people will give back.
100%. And, you know, even not just even the development, even pre-development and the onboarding, you know, onboarding a white Canadian Jewish guy into a job is going to be different than onboarding a Black woman into the same job even.
And absolutely. And, here's an example of something I witnessed at one of the companies. They're introducing me as a board member. And I remember this individual was excited to meet anyone on the board. And then also sometimes you might want to introduce the African-American board member to an African-American male versus recognize that you want and introduce them to all. And that really wasn't the problem. The challenge was this: I observed something in an organization once where there were certain people who were walking in and out of executives' doors, right? And I learned that that person had been hired by this individual because he knew the father, and they're at the same country club. So this person felt at ease walking in and saying hello to the president of the company. Well, I actually want them to have an awareness as well that as they do that, others are not going to feel comfortable. And this is when we as leaders need to actually reach out to others and invite them in and let them know that my door is just as open as you as anyone else. But the other person doesn't have that experience or the familiarity. So who's the onus on? We tend to make it the other person if they don't have the initiative. Well, they do. But if you invite it, think about what else that happens. And then there's a high level of engagement that can occur. But it was interesting to watch it and see this dynamic of someone that they know, oh, hi, is your father? It's on the golf course. And I'll talk my golf in a little bit. Versus someone who's new, back to onboarding, African-American male coming in, and they don't have necessarily those same experiences. And how to, and then how do we help them understand how to engage? And just think about just saying, hey, my door is open. I'm going to come see you every now and then, recognizing that certain people may not have those experiences, that they're not all equal. And how do we level the playing field by doing something as simple as thinking, let's talk? Or having the CEO, president reach out and have these meetings with the organization. Town halls are great, particularly when you do small ones. And I also say this to affinity groups: we'd like to get together and talk amongst ourselves. And sometimes it's maybe a complaint, or moaning session. But have you ever thought about bringing other affinity groups or inviting leadership into the group? Because, and also I say this, not just one, two. And the reason it's important to have two leaders in that meeting, see, that dialogue comes to the affinity group and the one leader. Now, if you got two, when they leave the room, both of them might actually have another conversation. And so you want to inspire more conversations about the challenges and opportunities that exist in companies. And so those are things I also encourage anyone as we think of organizations and how we engage.
Yeah, and I've always loved the word belonging because of my sports background. Before belonging became another word to add on to DE&I. It's been proven time and time again that there's nothing that fills our hearts and souls more than belonging. And I'm good friends with the former vice chairman of RBC, and he's a Canadian senator now. And he used to tell me this story about how he did this, and he had his direct reports do it with their direct reports. When everybody was in the offices, it was easier, but you can do it somewhat otherwise also. And the bottom line was, instead of going by their office and saying, hey, he told them to go into their office and say, you have 2 minutes, and just sit down in there for 2 minutes, not more, because they're busy. But if you sit down there, you actually made a much bigger impact caring how are you for real, rather than going by the office and saying, how you doing, like that.
I totally agree. And I also encourage this, particularly for folks leaving college and going into new jobs, that they should understand and get to know the management team. And picking up the phone and just asking if I could have 10 or 15 minutes of your time, because I'd love to learn more about you and how you manage the company. Think about the impact of that, just simply asking the question. But I wish someone had told me to do that when I was, coming out of business school, how to engage, to your point, interact. Yeah, we do some of it naturally, but I also think that we don't teach, whether in undergrad or elementary or grad school, the power of relationships. I say we don't teach how to manage money, and we don't teach managing relationships, and they're the most important things that we have to manage. And so I think that having that initial, like, I just like your advice, who doesn't want to give advice? And so a lot of people are afraid. So I'm saying right now, don't be afraid. Just simply make the ask. If they say no, but I will promise you, much like a lot of things in life, making the effort will lead to a great result. You're going to actually be more successful than you'll fail.
And you said something before that I think balances that too, because you do have to do that. However, the leaders have to give at least a vibe that they'll be okay with those type of things versus the negative vibe of, I'm too busy, don't talk to me. Because we have Open Door doesn't do it all the time. You've got to really
absolutely not. You have to be intentional about it, because Open Door means different things to other people. Back again, experiences, what we've done, understanding how to talk to somebody, what can I say. But I absolutely think that if you give the vibe, but that's again a responsibility, a corporate responsibility of leaders, is to make everyone in the organization feel at home. To your point, belong. And there is such a power. The word, even as I heard you say it, as I speak it, and what we all want as humans, it's just that sense. And the power of that none of us potentially could measure, but over time we could, when you have an organization with valued, and they build that, I belong here. And actually, I will say this, I bet your attrition rates will be better. All the things that we worry about that are costly. And I say this to organizations too. This is a number that has been proven, and some might argue it's higher. But remember, we were talking about onboarding and the cost. So let's just take that person's salary. Yep. When they say you lose a person, it's 3 times, is anywhere from 2 to 3 times that salary, the cost to the organization. So was a $100,000 salary, you just, it's going to cost you $200,000, $300,000 more because of lost productivity. Now you got to hire another search firm, on and on and on. But think about when you made the investment, invested in the investment and get a higher ROI. But I find it fascinating why we don't see more of that within organizations. I think, again, back to this idea of doing what's right. But it's also about culture. What do you value as an organization? Because everyone thinks P&L, and then our responsibilities to our stakeholders, including our shareholders, absolutely required. We have to recognize that we have responsibilities throughout the organization, from top to bottom and outside.
100%. I remember when Jack Ma, who's the founder of Alibaba, came here, and they were going public here. And he's had, even after that, some issues with China and how they're not really letting him do what he does. But he said, we have it wrong. You don't start with the shareholders, you start with your employees. Your employees are flourishing, and then everybody they talk to, the vendors to the customers, are flourishing, which means then they're performing better, which, guess what, then goes to the shareholders and stuff, instead of the other way around. It's not even rocket science.
So when people think of the P&L, they're thinking about the financials of an organization. I define P&L, people and leadership.
Yep.
That's the P&L of the organization.
Not to mention, don't get me started on quarterly results that make us think so short term. I may have told you this, I do a lot of sports analogies. If you tell a coach he's going to get fired if he doesn't win in the next 3 months, there's no future to think about. He'll do anything now because he's going to get fired if he doesn't. And unfortunately, it doesn't matter what happens after that. He'll worry about that later. And that's what happens kind of with quarterly results. So I wanted to also bring up, our name Fifth Element. It's because of the SDG 5, which is about women leadership, women empowerment. But it's also about the 5th Industrial Revolution, which is about humanity, which is what we're talking about. And the 4th is about tech. And tech's supposed to, and this is what's going to be interesting about AI, support humanity, not be humanity, if you will. So, but with respect to that, partnerships also play a big part. I want you to share some experiences that you've had, opportunities-wise, untapped talent, untapped opportunities, how you managed to scale Robinson Hill, drive sustainable growth, and leverage the talent, as we're talking about, to be a strategic asset. And as I think you may have had a great phrase, the power of one, which I thought was a brilliant phrase. Tell us about all that.
Well, I'm going to start with the power of one, and it took me a while to understand what it meant. And I happened to be on a call with Chris Gardner, and I'm sure the audience would know him, in Pursuit of Happiness, and he has his own financial service firm. And he tells the story about a minister who had a speech to deliver, a sermon, and he worked day and night on it, got to the church and realized there was only one person in the audience. And then, but he got there somewhat disappointed, but decided, I'm here to deliver a speech, and that's what he did. And he delivered it. It was phenomenal. The gentleman in the office walked up to me and said, thank you, you've changed my life. And that was Billy Graham. And what Chris said, the reason I know that's true, because Billy Graham told him the story. And why it's so relevant, and even for me, is that, frankly, I was slow to do certain things because I thought I had to, do something major, massive. I have to have an impact on the world. But a lot of people think this all or nothing and have this all or nothing mentality, right? And then do nothing because they start to think that the task is just too overwhelming for me to do anything. And that's actually how I got to help build my company. And so I finally, even my book, you keep thinking there's so many books out there and who wants to hear my story? But look, if you touch one, and I said this earlier, then that person will likely touch another. And when I just take the approach that I am going to do good and try to deposit the one without trying to carry the burden of the world and results, that's where I think the real magic and the sweetness of this lovely life that we live resides. And so, for that, and Robinson Hill, I want everyone to know too, there's success and failure, and I failed. I have some colossal failures, and there was a great article, I think it was in Forbes magazine, it was called The Success Failure. And it had all these major leaders, Uberoff, Scorsese, Coppola, I think, all these people, Smithberg from Quaker, if you recall, and the debacle of Snapple.
Yeah.
And here's what I learned. I said, first of all, I'm not going to lose anything that great. Number two, they all came back. And what they might have felt at that task, they did not take away their talent, which you were alluding to earlier. We soar with our strengths. We know what we got that got us there. And then we learn from all the things from the past and we apply it forward. And that's the thing that I had to learn. And it was an uphill battle, honestly. But then I started to move in the right direction, thinking that, all right, am I going to fail? What did I learn from that failure? How do I build on it and keep doing that? The other piece of the question, part of your question, was about partnership. So I had to study really early on how to succeed at partnerships because I had only been hearing about those that failed. And most people who have partners failed. So then how do we make sure that we don't fail? So first and foremost is understanding where values align and all of those things, making sure you have the hard discussions early on. But most important, I knew this. I was able to get my company up to a certain point, but I also knew the vision I had for the company, I needed to have strategic partners in order to grow and experience exponential growth. And that's exactly what's happened. So I could stay at one level, and it's okay. Once we all decide who we want to be, then that will lead your steps. Someone said to me when I was starting out, no, I want you, whatever you think, and I tell people this today, wherever you think you want to be as a company, I want you now to multiply that by 5. So whatever that vision is, now I want you to say is 5 times that growth. Because whatever that vision is, your steps will be guided there. Now, and there's a book called 10X Growth. Now, 10X is also interesting, and many people don't think they've ever experienced 5X or 10X. The fact is they have. It's all perspective. Now, 10X requires a different kind of thinking. Technology comes into play, and how we start looking at the other resources out there that we can use to help us expedite growth. Right. So for me, it was starting to just to understand a path of partners, and then where technology, even now, as I am launching a new bourbon company, I am now studying AI, and I'd love to learn more. I fortunately sit on the board of a company called Revive, which is AI in the beauty space, who's doing such innovative and amazing things, and any company can scale with AI when done right. But now I'm thinking, how do I become a disruptor? How do I actually grow? And I'm studying that, because you don't do it for sake of just, oh, there's this technology. Is it smart? Is it something you can employ to help you achieve your corporate goals?
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. And I think as we move towards completion here, or let's say in LA, we want to leave them wanting more so we can do a sequel. That's what we got to do here. You know, you talk about courage, and there's so many aspects where you talked about that you do need courage to speak up to your boss about something in a professional way, but speak up, or to go after the 10x instead of the 5x instead of 1x, because it makes you think about, we'll do this and this and this, or courage to speak to one person in the audience versus saying, oh, this is a waste of time type of deal, you know, and give your best for that one person. It all takes a special type of courage, and you make an impact every single time.
And that's the beauty. You know, I say we all deserve to be anywhere our dreams take us.
I'm in.
And we can do that. That's right. That's right. But we all can do that. Leaning in, having that one conversation. I promise you, the things that you fear that will happen. Frankly, I think there's joy and excitement and a lot of other good stuff on the other side when we're just willing to take that one step and recognize that there's fear, and we all have it. But we're courageous despite of that. And when I learned, like Katharine Graham, Toni Morrison, and all the people who I admire, talked about it, people who influenced my life, learning how they balance fear, you know, Gloria Vanderbilt, I mean, I can go down a list of people, and I'm like, what? They fear? No one thinks that they fear. They see people and they only see the really good stuff. I will promise you, every single successful person or anyone that we think we admire who influence our lives, they have encountered it, but they have learned to manage it.
Yeah, 100%. You know, I guess one last thing is that everybody has a dream. In fact, Kobe said this, everybody should have a dream. But what they got to understand is the dream is now, is what he used to say. And it was a brilliant comment.
And you know what? It is very true. The life we live is the one that we live today. Think about that. And so, you know, I just saw something recently. Those that might experience depression, it's because they're living in the past. Those that have anxiety are trying to live in the future. And then where the sweet spot is when you just live in the now. And I'm not going to say, first of all, my mom said, no one ever said it'd be easy. Again, another important lesson in my life, it won't be, but who said it would be? So when you encounter those obstacles, I mean, just embrace them. That's just part of the journey, but that's where we grow, when we're stretched, when we're uncomfortable. I think what you're doing as an organization and helping others be more courageous leaders, those that help them understand how to employ the fourth and fifth element. I know that you're impacting the world, and I'm grateful for you, truly. And I want to have you and ask you to keep doing all the good that you're doing in the world. It's just my absolute pleasure to be here today with you.
Well, you almost half answered my last question there. You told me what you're grateful for. What are you most grateful for, and what are you most hopeful for?
So what I'm grateful for are opportunities like this, and I mean that absolutely. You know, I knew I connected with you the first time you and I talked, and the fact that you helped me think about things in different ways, and the spirit of the work that you do, and then how I see it, and love what you're doing. Number one, grateful for that. I'm grateful for this day. I mean, I was able to wake up, and hopefully I can make an impact. I express gratitude all the time, because I also realize this: the more I'm grateful, the more I'll have things to be grateful for. What was your second question of that? The other one was, what am I hopeful for? What I'm hopeful for is that people will embrace the light within, shine their light. The shine your light is the good with all of us. It's if we look in and recognize it and own it, and then step out and have a conversation again with one, we'll learn that we have more in common that are different, and that we can then really impact not only our own lives, but the lives of others. And so I'm hopeful that we are willing to stop allowing fear and difference get in the way of us actually being a better place, a better world.
Well said. Thank you so much for sharing that and for being, I'm grateful that you're a leader who cares for real. And that's given me the hope also, all tied in one beautiful package.
Thank you so much.